Do you think you've heard every story of betrayal? The ones between the closest of friends, the deepest of lovers, the ones that tear families apart? Those wounds cut deep, they ache, and sometimes we believe no pain could ever be greater. But today I want to invite you into a different kind of story. A story of a betrayal on a scale the human mind can scarcely comprehend. A schism that broke not just a friendship, but the single greatest friendship that ever existed. A betrayal that shook the very foundations of the cosmos, redrew the map of the galaxies, and left a wound so profound that even now, in the quiet hum of existence, we can still feel its echo. This is not a simple tale of good versus evil. This is the story of order and freedom, of love and ideology, of unending patience and unwavering hope. This is the story of Kyle and Lyra, and I promise you the end of this story will change everything you think you know about it, about the myths, yams you've heard, and perhaps even about the very nature of forgiveness. So, before we open this cosmic chronicle, I want to know where you are on this journey with me. Where are you listening from, and what time is it for you right now? Drop a comment below. I want to see how far across the world our story is reaching tonight. In the dawn of all things, before the first tick of time or the first inch of space had been measured, there was only the source. Not a bearded king on a throne, but a shoreless ocean of pure creative potential, a singular infinite intelligence that sang the universe into being through the immutable laws of harmony. And from the heart of that ocean, the source brought forth its first two creations, its first two concepts, the twin stars of a nascent cosmos. The first was Kale. He was the embodiment of order, of structure, of the elegant, unshakable balance that dictated the spin of a planet and the graceful arc of a galaxy. His name meant balance. He was not a cold warrior, but a master architect, a silent sculptor who ensured the grand symphony of existence was always played in perfect tune without a single discordant note. His light was a steady golden white flame, the reassuring glow of a timeless beacon. The second, born in the same breath of creation as Kyle, was Lyra. She was the embodiment of unbound light, of limitless creativity, of art and pure, untethered beauty. Her name meant the lyre, the instrument of cosmic music, the wellspring of inspiration. If Kyle was the rhythm, Lyra was the soaring, breathtaking melody. Her light was a brilliant, iridescent silver, constantly shifting and shimmering like an aurora dancing in the void. She could paint nebulae in the shape of flowers that had never existed, or weave choruses from starlight that made all other beings fall silent in awe. They were more than the first creations. They were two halves of a whole. Kyle provided the structure. Lyra filled it with beauty. Kyle would weave the lattice of a new galaxy. Lyra would breathe constellations into the spaces between. They were inseparable companions, soulmates in the truest sense, in an existence that knew nothing of loneliness. We can only imagine the moments unrecorded by any history, the two of them leaning against a young asteroid, watching a galaxy of their own design ignite for the first time. Lyra's shimmering laughter as she teased Kyle for his solemnity, and Kyle, ever composed, unable to suppress a gentle smile at her radiant spirit. Their bond was older than the most ancient stars and purer than the first light of creation. The nexus, the very heart of reality, where the energy of the source was most potent, was their playground, their workshop, their home, a testament to a perfect, unbroken friendship. But in all perfection, even on a cosmic scale, a seed of change lies dormant. And this seed did not sprout from envy or malice. It grew from the very core of Lyra's being, her boundless, infinite creativity. To Kale, the laws of the source were a sanctuary, the very foundation of harmony. But to Lyra, after eons of existence, they began to feel like a limitation. A gilded cage, however beautiful, was a cage nonetheless. She looked upon the other luminous beings, content in their preordained orbits, and she saw wasted potential. Why must we follow a score that has already been written? She began to wonder. Why can we not compose our own music, chaotic though it may be, as long as it is ours? A dangerous idea began to take root. It wasn't evil. It was a profound philosophical schism. Lyra started to whisper her ideas. She didn't use threats. She used the seductive allure of a greater ideal. You deserve more freedom, she would say to a young entity, struggling to form a new star. Don't let the old rules bind your potential. Break them, and see how brightly you can truly shine. She began to subtly gaslight an entire generation, making them believe that the safety of the Source's order was, in fact, a sophisticated form of servitude. Kale was the first to notice the change. He saw that Lyra's light, while still brilliant, now held a different quality, a restlessness, a simmering discontent. He sought her out in their private spaces amidst the swirling nebulae they had once crafted together. "Lyra, what is this you're doing?" he asked, his voice laced with a deep and growing concern. "These ideas of yours, they are causing instability. They are whispers of chaos." Lyra merely looked at him, her eyes no longer holding the same familiar warmth, but something akin to pity. "Kale, my dearest friend," she replied, her voice soft but firm. "You are so bound to order that you cannot see the truth. The Source gave us infinite potential and then grew afraid of its own creation's power. I am not breaking things, Kyle. I am setting them free." Every word she spoke was an invisible blade, twisting in Kyle's very essence. He tried to reason with her, to use logic, to use the weight of their shared memories to sway her, but all he received in return was a growing distance, a wall of ideology he could not penetrate. The first crack had appeared, not just in the fabric of the Nexus, but in the heart of the universe's greatest bond, and he knew with a certainty that chilled him to his core that a storm was coming, and his best friend, his other half, was standing directly at its center. The whispers of Lyra became a current, then a tide, then a tidal wave of dissent. The simmering discontent she had nurtured erupted into a full-fledged movement. And then the fateful day arrived. Lyra called for a grand convergence at the very core of the Nexus, under the silent witness of 1 billion stars. She would no longer hide her intentions in the shadows. Standing upon a colossal crystal of pure energy, her light flaring with an intensity that was both captivating and terrifying, Lyra delivered the proclamation that would shatter their reality. "Beings of the Nexus." Her voice resonated, not with sound, but with a wave of pure thought that touched every mind. "For too long, we have existed in the shadow of an order we did not choose. For too long, our brilliance has been confined by laws we did not write. Today, I declare that this order is a fallacy. The harmony imposed upon us by the Source is a monotonous drone, a gilded cage for the spirit. The time has come for us to compose our own symphony, a symphony of absolute freedom." She paused, letting the shock ripple through the assembled entities. "I will forge a new order, a new universe, where every single being is the source of their own reality, the god of their own destiny. No more rules, no more limits, only infinite, untamed potential." The space fell into a deafening silence. Millions of luminous souls held their breath, and in that silence, Lyra did the most devastating thing of all. She turned her gaze to Kyle, who stood silently on the opposing side, his core feeling as though it were being crushed by a dying star. Her gaze was not that of a leader to a subordinate, but of a friend to her oldest companion. "Kyle," her voice softened, becoming an intimate, almost pleading whisper across the void. "My brother, the one who lit the first stars with me. Come, stand with me now. Together we will liberate this universe from its stagnation. Together we will show them what true brilliance looks like." The entire cosmos seemed to stop, waiting for his answer. For Kyle, this was no longer a philosophical debate. This was the final, irrevocable choice. He looked deep into Lyra's eyes, searching for a flicker of the friend he knew, the mischievous spirit who had once danced among the comets. But he saw only the blazing fire of ambition, an ideal that had twisted into an obsession. His heart, his very essence, broke into a million pieces. He shook his head, a slow, deliberate motion of profound finality, and then he uttered a single word, a word that weighed as much as a galaxy, a word that officially buried their great friendship. No. His no was not a shout. It was a quiet, sharp, and absolute sound that sliced through the charged silence, severing the last thread that bound them. Lyra's eyes widened for a fraction of a second, a flash of raw hurt appearing before it was replaced by a mask of cold, resolute disappointment. The point of no return had been crossed. Their bond had turned to cosmic dust. Kyle's refusal was the final spark. The nexus, the heart of universal harmony, was torn asunder. A great schism began. Like a sheet of glass struck by a stone, the fracture spread with unimaginable speed. The entities of the nexus were forced to choose. Those seduced by Lyra's promise of power and freedom, those who felt stifled by the ancient laws, rallied to her side. Their light shifted, becoming wild, unpredictable, electric. Those who believed in harmony, in balance, those who feared the coming chaos, gathered behind Kyle. The nexus was cleaved in two, one side a roiling, brilliant storm of silver light, the other a steady, resolute fortress of gold. For Kyle, these were the most agonizing moments of his eternal existence. He wasn't just preparing for a war, he was mourning a friendship that was now dead. He looked across the newly formed chasm and saw familiar faces, beings he had worked alongside, laughed alongside. Now they looked at him with the eyes of an enemy. He saw young spirits he had once mentored, now wielding weapons of raw energy, ready to fight for Lyra's cause. Every decision he made carried the weight of this colossal loss. He had to rally the loyalists, devise strategies, fortify their defenses. But in his mind, in his core, a single name screamed in silent agony: Lyra. He asked himself 1,000 times, where did I go wrong? What could I have done differently? Could I have saved her? But he knew it was too late. The war was not just external, between two factions. The most brutal war was the one raging inside his own soul. The universe held its breath. The pain of this great divorce, this cosmic sundering, settled over everything. And every being knew with a dreadful certainty that no matter who won, the nexus could never be whole again. An age of innocence was over. An age of conflict and sorrow was about to begin. Amidst the escalating chaos, a profound stillness emanated from the throne of the Source. And from that stillness, a mandate was issued, not in words, but as a direct flow of purpose into Kyle's mind. He was given the ultimate responsibility to take command of the Guardians, the loyalist forces dedicated to preserving cosmic order. The authority vested in him brought no glory. It felt like a mountain of cold, dead stone pressing down upon his very essence. He had become the symbol of the resistance, the leader of one side in a civil war he had never wanted. He stood alone on the highest observation spire of the Nexus, gazing down at the fractured reality below. He summoned his blade. It was not forged of metal, but of condensed light and solidified order. Its glow was not brilliant, but deep and unwavering. He looked at his own reflection on its polished surface and saw not a triumphant general, but a grieving friend. He saw the weight of the millions of souls who now placed their faith in him. He remembered a time, an eternity ago, when Lyra had used her own energy to etch a small, crystalline flower onto the hilt of his sword as a gift. "To bring a little beauty to all your seriousness," she had said, her laughter like ringing bells. Now that crystal flower seemed to have lost its luster. He reached out, his ethereal fingers gently tracing its petals, and felt a wave of profound sorrow. This sword, the symbol of his role as an architect, was now to become an instrument of division. It would soon be pointed at the very being who had once adorned it. He knew what he had to do. He had to protect the balance. He had to shield the billions of innocent lives from the chaos Lyra's ideal would unleash. He had to do what was right. But the cost of being right was a price too terrible to comprehend. He was not fighting for the source. He was not fighting for rules. He was fighting because if he didn't, everything he and Lyra had once cherished would be annihilated. He was the tragic hero, the soldier marching into battle with a broken heart, to fight against a part of his own soul. The storm was no longer coming. It was here, and its lonely, reluctant commander was ready to face it. And so the moment arrived. The celestial expanse of the Nexus, once a symphony of harmonious colors, was now ripped apart by two opposing tides of energy. On one side, the golden, warm but unyielding light of Kyle and the Guardians. On the other, the brilliant, wild, and mercurial silver light of Lyra and the rebels. The final war began. It was nothing like the clumsy, brutal battles of mortals. It was a ballet, a tragic, devastating ballet of light and shadow. Lances of pure energy collided, creating silent, blossoming explosions that sent ripples across the fabric of space. The Guardians moved in perfect geometric formations, the embodiment of order. Lyra's forces fought with improvisation, with passion, each attack a unique expression of their newfound identity. And at the epicenter of this deadly dance was the duel between Kyle and Lyra. They met in the void between their armies, not with roars of hatred, but with the full, crushing weight of their shared history. Kyle's blade was steady, each swing a precise mathematical arc of law. Lyra, in turn, wielded her energy like ribbons of starlight, both beautiful and lethal, weaving around Kyle, attacking him from every conceivable angle. "Why has it come to this, Lyra?" Kyle's voice was a raw cry of anguish as he parried a blow that sizzled with volatile power. "You still don't see, do you, Kyle?" she cried back, tears of pure light streaming from her eyes. "I am doing this for all of us, so we can be free. Your loyalty has blinded you." They fought, and with every clash of their weapons, fragments of their shared memories shattered between them. The memory of weaving the Milky Way, their energies intertwining. The memory of her laughter as they rode the tail of a passing comet. The memory of the first symphony of light they composed together, so pure it had made the source itself seem to hum with approval. Their battle was their final conversation, a dialogue spoken with blades of light. Kale knew he could not sustain this. Lyra's ideology was too potent, too seductive. If he did not end this now, chaos would consume everything. With a final soul-tearing cry, he focused all the power of order, all his pain and resolve, into a single definitive strike. It was a blow designed not to kill, but to shatter her concentration, to break the storm of chaotic energy that fueled her. His blade found its mark, piercing through her dazzling defense. For one heart-stopping moment, there was absolute silence. He had won, but his victory did not bring peace. It triggered something ancient, a final fail-safe protocol embedded in the very laws of the universe, a law even Kale had not fully comprehended. When the imbalance reached a critical point, when a primordial being attempted to rewrite the fundamental code of existence, the universe would protect itself. A tear, in reality, began to open behind Lyra and her followers. It was not a gateway. It was a wound, a patch of absolute blackness that drank all light, all sound, all hope, the void, the dimension of utter non-existence. Lyra and her legions were pulled inexorably towards it. Kael reached out instinctively, his hand of light stretching across the chasm, trying to catch her, but it was too late. In the final moment, as she was drawn into the darkness, He looked deep into her eyes. He had expected to see hatred, defiance, but he saw neither. He saw only shock, a dawning, horrified realization of where her grand ideal had led, and then a look of profound, heart-shattering pain. And then she was gone. The wound in space sealed itself shut. The symphony was over. All that remained was a shattered, echoing silence. The Nexus was quiet. It was a heavy, suffocating silence, utterly alien to the harmonious stillness of before. The war was over. The Loyalists had won, but no one celebrated. The celestial sky was scarred with energy burns and dark patches where entities had ceased to be. A third of the universe's light had been extinguished. Kyle stood alone amidst the wreckage, his blade hanging limply at his side. He was a hero. He had saved the cosmos from unraveling into chaos, but all he felt was a hollow, aching void within himself that mirrored the one that had just claimed Lyra. He had saved the forest, but had been forced to cut down its most beautiful tree. The loneliness that enveloped him was colder than the space between galaxies. Order was restored, but it was a sad, wounded order. In the aftermath, the Source gave Kyle a new purpose, a new duty. He was no longer the architect of the Nexus. He was to become the guardian of the fledgling worlds, the young, developing planets on the outer fringes of the cosmos, including a small blue-green sphere that would one day be called Earth. His mission was to protect them, not from external invaders, but from the chaotic echoes that still leaked from the void where Lyra and her followers were imprisoned. Their rage, their sorrow, their madness would sometimes seep out, causing instabilities, nightmares, and conflicts in the minds of the young lifeforms below. Kyle became the silent sentinel, the shield that protected these new seeds of life from the ancient wounds of the universe. He accepted this duty as a penance. He left the splendor of the Nexus, turning his back on its painful memories, and began his endless, solitary patrol. He became a myth, a guardian spirit whispered about in prayers, but no one truly knew the depth of the sorrow he carried, the grief for a lost friend and a shattered symphony. Eons passed like moments for an eternal being. Kyle performed his duties flawlessly. He was the stoic, perfect guardian, a bulwark against the darkness. He would soothe the psychic storms that threatened nascent civilizations and gently nudge the balance back into place wherever the echoes of the void threatened to overwhelm it. He was a legend, an icon of protection. But that was only what the universe saw. There was another truth, a secret Kyle kept locked away in the deepest part of his being, a secret ritual he performed in the quietest moments as he stood at the very edge of reality, at the metaphysical border of the void. He did not stand there merely to watch. Every cycle, for millions of years, he did something no one knew. He would close his eyes, not to rest, but to remember. He would dive into the infinite archives of his own memory, seeking out the purest, most joyful moments he had shared with Lyra. He would recall the sensation of their energies weaving together to birth the Andromeda galaxy. He would relive her silvery laughter as they surfed the solar winds of a newborn star. He would reconstruct, note by luminous note, the first symphony of light they had ever composed together, a piece so beautiful it had made the Source itself pause in appreciation. And then he would do the impossible. He would take these memories, these perfect crystalline fragments of joy and love, and gently release them into the void. They were not attacks, they were offerings, tiny fireflies of light drifting into the absolute darkness, carrying with them the warmth of a forgotten time. He was no longer trying to fight her. He was no longer trying to reason with her. He was simply trying to remind her of who she truly was before ideology and pride had consumed her. He was not her jailer. He was a storyteller trying to retell their story in the hopes that somewhere in that endless night she was listening. He was not trying to win a war, he was trying to call her home. And here is the greater twist, the truth that underpinned it all. The source knew. The infinite creative intelligence had known all along. From the very beginning, the plan was never Lyra's destruction. The source understood that Lyra's creativity, just like Kyle order, was an essential part of the cosmic whole. Punishment was not its way. Patience was. The source had allowed Kyle his secret ritual. It had sanctioned this silent, hopeful act because it knew that the only way Lyra could ever be healed was not by force, but by choice, by her own self-realization, by her feeling the stark, unbearable contrast between the cold, mad chaos of the void and the gentle warmth of the harmonious memories Kyle sent to her, by her remembering the joy of creating within balance, not against it. Kyle's true mission, therefore, was never to be a warrior. It was to be a vessel of hope. He was the living embodiment of patient love, of a loyalty not to a set of rules, but to a lost soul. The twist of the story was not a sudden battle. The twist was that this was never a story about a war. It was always a story about love and about a grand cosmic plan of healing that was far beyond the comprehension of anyone but the source itself. Time continued its relentless march. Worlds were born and died, civilizations rose and fell, and Kyle remained at his post, the silent guardian, the tireless sower of memories. He no longer expected a response. The act itself had become a part of him, a wordless prayer, an act of pure faith. He did it not because he hoped Lyra would return, but because he simply couldn't not do it. It was the only way he could keep the memory of his best friend, the true Lyra, alive. And then one day, after an eternity of absolute crushing silence, a miracle happened. As Kale released another memory, the memory of Lyra's smile as she shaped her very first light butterfly, he prepared to turn away, as he always did, but something stopped him. From the deepest, blackest heart of the void, something answered. It was not a word, it was not an image, it was a note. A single musical note, faint, as fragile as a spider's thread, but perfectly, exquisitely clear. It was the first note of the symphony they had composed together at the dawn of time. It sounded for only a heartbeat, and then was gone, swallowed once more by the silence. But Kyle had heard it. He stood frozen, motionless. The entire universe seemed to fall away. 1,000,000 years of burden, of grief, of loneliness seemed to dissolve in that one fleeting moment. He slowly turned back to face the darkness of the void, his eyes wide with a feeling he had long forgotten. It was not Lyra's return. It was not her surrender. It was not a victory. It was a sign, a single candle lit in an infinite night, a whisper that confirmed she was still there somewhere in the chaos, and she was listening. She was beginning to remember. For the first time in millions upon millions of years, Kyle smiled. It was not a full smile. It was a trembling, broken, and beautiful thing. A single tear of pure light welled in his eye, and as it fell into the void of space, it crystallized, becoming a new star, a star the color of hope. The Great War had ended long ago, but the journey of healing, for Lyra, for Kyle, and for the universe itself, was only just beginning. And at the end of that long road, a tiny, distant light was finally beginning to shine. The story of Kale and Lyra, the tale of the universe's shattered symphony, teaches us something so simple, yet so profound. It teaches us that sometimes the greatest strength isn't found in a sword that can conquer galaxies, but in the patience that can wait for eons. That the greatest courage isn't in facing an enemy with fire and fury, but in refusing to give up on someone you love, even when they are lost in their own darkness. Perhaps in our own small universe, each of us can be a Kael to someone's Lyra. A parent, a friend, a partner, a teacher, someone who patiently holds a candle of hope, waiting for a single note in reply from the void. Thank you for walking with me on this journey tonight. If this story touched your heart, if it made you think, please don't hesitate to share it with someone you feel might need to hear it. And most of all, if you wish to continue exploring these kinds of deep stories, these myths retold from a new perspective, then become a part of this community. Join our channel by hitting that subscribe button right now and be sure to turn on notifications. Because the universe is full of stories and our journey of discovery has only just begun. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next story.